Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to Kickback Comics. My name is Antonio.
My name is Ben, and this is a comic book podcast.
By two guys who have not read a lot of comics, but are definitely looking to get involved, read some good comics, look at some pretty pictures, all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, comics is our new hobby, and you guys are along for the ride.
Along for the ride. Welcome, and we appreciate you being here. Today, we're going to be talking about a pretty interesting story, a very beautiful story, in my opinion, too, called God Country.
Yeah, God Country by Donny Cates.
Donny Cates.
I read this one a few years ago, and it was pretty near the top of my list of comics I was excited to revisit and talk about with you, Antonio. One of the reasons why I think this is like a great one for us to be talking about is it's a totally self-contained story.
Right.
It's only 6 issues, and it's got a full beginning, middle, and end, which is, it's funny, you know, in most mediums, stories have a beginning, middle, and end, but not in comics really all the time.
They just be going and going, new universes, new Earths, everything different like that. So it kind of keeps going on. But yeah, this is, I really honestly enjoyed the length of this. I feel like it was a good, and we read of all kind of 6 issues back to back, or at least that was the way that I kind of ended up reading it.
Yeah.
And so it was a great length. It felt contained. It felt right. You felt like you got kind of the full climax resolution, all of that kind of stuff in there.
Yeah, it's crazy. You know, you were sort of mentioning this earlier when you first pulled up. It's like I'm always surprised by how quickly I finish a graphic novel like this, like trade paperback. Like I'll get them from Barnes. You know, I'll be like, oh, sick, I've got all these books, and then it's like you really read them pretty quick.
Yeah, you do.
You know,
yeah. I know. I got through. I mean, this also again, like it felt like a good read though. I felt like I was, and who knows, maybe it's also just like the. I mean, some people are better, maybe full book readers than me, but you know, the day and age, this felt like a good, long enough to get everything that you need from it, but short enough to feel like something that's digestible.
Yeah, for us, like short attention span,
right,
people,
this generation. But it felt good, and it was a really interesting story that I feel like had a lot of powerful themes that. You know, you kind of gave me at least a little bit, not like any kind of spoilers, but a little bit of a synopsis of what was going to be going on in this. But I was not ready for kind of how, really in a lot of places, like emotional this story is. Yeah,
totally. This whole book is, you know, some of the main themes is about sort of father-son relationships. I mean, family in general is a big theme, but it's a lot of father-son stuff.
Father-son, and I think also, and we'll get into really what we mean by these two, but I think like letting go is really, I mean, and that I think was like one of the like powerful ones, like definitely legacy and father and son. But I think like for me, the idea of like knowing that there's a point to be able to let go, and that by holding on too much, you're maybe inflicting negative things on yourself, the people around you, whatever else.
Yeah, that's definitely, you know, something that we haven't really touched on that much in comics yet. I mean, you know, we've basically read Spider-Man.
Right, yes.
And we're going from Spider-Man to this. And not saying that Spider-Man can't be used as a vessel for sort of deeper storytelling, but it's like, I think a lot of people don't think of comics as a medium as, you know, like even this story, it's like on the outside, it's a book about a guy fighting gods in outer space.
With a big old sword, right? People think of like comics and they think of like kapow and like, you know, whatever else, right?
And
like,
it is kapow.
It is kapow, but it's also so much more.
Right, like this one specifically is literally examining difficult relationships with your dad and thinking about legacy and loss.
And this is dedicated to dad.
Dedicated to dad.
Yeah, dedicated to Mr. Cates' dad, Donny Cates' dad.
Yeah.
And I think is a really, and again, we'll get deeper into all of what I mean by this, but I think it really is like a beautiful demonstration of like the love, but also like difficulty, I think, that we have in close relationships like family. And
yeah,
like
totally. That. All right, cool. So I just pulled up our little fact sheet here on our dossier so we can start talking about this book and with a little bit more specifics. So yeah, the title of this comic is God Country. It's published by Image Comics in 2017. It's 6 issues. It's written by Donny Cates. The artist is Geoff Shaw.
Geoff or Jeff, or I can't even tell.
I don't know. Is that a normal Jeff?
I don't know if it's a normal Jeff, but it's definitely, I think it is a Jeff.
Geoff?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, who's...
Shout out to the...
My brain just went, yeah.
Shout out to the Geoffs.
Dude is Geoff, but you're totally right. Maybe that's my name, Jeff, but...
Yeah, my name, yeah.
For everybody's context, it's Geoff, and I'm dyslexic as anything, so...
No, this is good. But so anyway, yeah, Jeff Shaw.
Shout out him.
Yes.
The art is so cool in this book.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Can't wait for when we have this process further along and we're going to be sharing more actual images with you guys.
And we might come back to this.
Yeah, maybe even. Point, well, definitely, we could do posts like retroactively.
Yeah.
Anyways, moving on. The color artist is Jason Wardy, or Wardy. The color also amazing. Letterer, John J. Hill. The lettering is super cool. We're definitely going to
That's a pretty good one. That's a pretty good one overall.
The whole thing's amazing. Yeah, so this whole collected edition trade paperback, also from 2017. It's set in Texas. It's sort of, as we touched on earlier, it's a story about father and son, their difficult relationship, and a bunch of battles with gods.
Right, yeah, we got a little bit of fantasy into here. And I guess, so this is maybe, I guess, a good time to dive into what this story is really about and what kind of all of these, and we'll kind of go issue by issue here. And so kind of starting the beginning here, we get this kind of layout of who these people are and what this is really all going to be about. And I feel like the first thing that we get is a lot of narration. That's one of the things that Ben and I actually talked about outside of the podcast, is that versus Spider-Man, which we read earlier, which really used kind of narration as kind of a time-based thing. This is much more guiding the story, and I think giving you this kind of really nice outside context for all of this.
Right. Like there's a full-on narrator saying, this story was told to me and now I'm going to tell it to you.
Right.
It's not just
this is also like a passed down story, which I think, falls into some of the other themes that we'll talk about here.
Real quick, I'm just going to jump in and say that we're going to sort of enter the spoiler part of our conversation. I don't think spoilers is like super, like obviously we're discussing this book and we're, as we figure out our process, we'll figure out how much conversation we want to have before getting into specifics. But yeah, Antonio, why don't you run through our sort of issue by issue summary real quick?
Yeah.
Give people / give each other, ourselves,
the breakdown.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So I'll start with obviously issue 1 here. So this story starts with kind of setting the entire stage for what's going on. You see kind of this big open view of Texas. You've got a little rabbit in the corner, a hare, one of those creatures down there in the corner. But you also get the narrator kind of talking to you about how this is a story that's really been passed down. It's a story that was told to this narrator, now is going to be told to us. And so what we kind of start with here is our first character, who we kind of understand as this guy basically bringing his family to take care of his dad. And so this son, this guy, his name is Roy, his dad, Emmett, is currently battling Alzheimer's. He's living, as far as I know, before this, he was living alone. And so the family's kind of coming to stay with him. This is Roy, his wife, Janie, and then their daughter, Dina, who are coming to stay with Emmett. Roy's been refusing to put Emmett in a home, and it's kind of tearing the family apart. There's this moment where Janie and Roy are kind of fighting over this, and then she kind of walks off and is about to leave in the truck to have kind of Roy deal with the situation momentarily, at least on his own.
Yeah, I mean, this is a serious. I mean, that sort of, it throws us right into some pretty real stuff. Like, police are having to get called to the house because Emmett is like in a crazy rage, like yelling. He's gonna kill people in front of his, like, in the house.
The granddaughter.
We see the little granddaughter like all freaked out and like having to, I want to see Grandpa, and Grandpa's like, I'm gonna kill everybody. Kind of, it's not a good vibe.
It's hard. Really, I think what they put on the beginning of this is that the situation that they're in is hard and complicated in ways that we don't even fully understand yet. And as this is going on, after we see Emmett, this grandpa, kind of yelling at his family, we kind of see how far progressed his battle with Alzheimer's is. There's this, we kind of get this backstory of this magical storm that's kind of coming along towards Texas, as this gigantic tornado. Not even tornado, I feel like super
huge.
hurricane.
Magic
super
storm.
Magic hurricane that's just tearing across Texas, and it comes towards the house and just absolutely starts tearing apart the house. And this is also the first glimpse that we get of kind of these otherworldly figures that are starting to enter this story. This first demon shows up, this big kind of like black figure shows up after the storm has just completely decimated the house that that Emmett has been staying in. And then as kind of this last moment's about to happen where this demon is about to snap Dina, the granddaughter, in half, Emmett shows up. There's this big boom, crash, kaboom, pow.
Yeah, huge boom.
Yeah, huge boom. And Emmett shows up wielding this gigantic, like, Excalibur broadsword type of sword. And
it looks crazy. It's so big.
It's beautiful. This is also a very, very beautiful panel. If you get a chance to actually read this comic, all these panels are incredible. Color, just all the parts of the artistry here are really just amazing. And you get, at first you don't even realize who this is. Until the little girl calls out Grandpa, and you start realizing, oh, this is the same guy that we just saw, and what's even funnier here is that when you actually look at this, you don't really see his face when he's yelling and saying that he's going to kill them and different things like that. And then in this moment, you get this kind of like nicely painted pink and blue background of him like smiling, looking at the family, his granddaughter's running towards him. And you feel like something's different about him for sure.
Oh, yeah.
And then this first issue really ends where you kind of start seeing what this story is going to turn into, where we see these broken chains flying off in space attached to the arm of somebody, some ancient being, ancient God.
Yeah. I mean, God, like, we can assume God Country, the book. It's like we know there's some God.
Right. This is, and the last panel on this in this issue is. Says, they're talking about the sword, and now this is the God who wanted it back. This gigantic, big guy, powerful God.
It's crazy. It zooms way out. Like we go from the tiny little, our little, Texas prairie setting to all of a sudden, oh, this is cosmic now.
Right,
we're in outer space. We're looking down at Earth from like a distance.
Exactly. This is cosmic now.
Another thing to jump in on these panels that's really cool is like in the art, there's a lot of homage getting paid to like previous eras of comics. One of the things I learned about was anytime you see this sort of like bubbly crackle looking thing, I call it crackle because like this effect is referred to as Kirby Crackle,
right
after like one of the OG masters of comics. He was he was like a long-term collaborator with Stan Lee.
Right, yeah.
They had like a contentious relationship, and there's a whole I'm sure there'll be more specific comics written by them or with art by Kirby that we'll talk about, but this is referred to as Kirby Crackle. And also he had a whole story that I think he was the writer on as well, called New Gods. This is like way back in in a previous era of comics. But even just the design of the gods in this book and the whole aesthetic with like the vivid colors and the crackle and everything.
Reference there. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. I think it's definitely pretty direct reference to that era of comics and Kirby Crackle. You can also see Kirby Crackle in Spider-Verse.
Right.
That whole thing, all of the bubbles, and then especially in the first one when you're near the reactor that's tearing all the comic universes.
Right. A lot of
that's all it's all the same stuff.
Yeah, what a beautiful movie. Anyway. That's actually great context. I mean, this book again this comic is absolutely beautiful. And so this second issue kind of starts with us on this big beautiful kind of sunrise. I can't even tell if it's sunrise or sunset.
It's awesome.
Right, but it's absolutely beautiful. These amazing pink, orange hues, right? Beautiful sunset. And then you get this moment where you really start realizing that the family is noticing that something is different about Emmett, about Grandpa. Dina, the young granddaughter's running up, and his face is lighting up. He's reacting. He's saying, how happy he is to see them. He's remembering people's names is a big thing. You kind of get this flashback to when they first kind of started seeing him losing things. Yeah, he starts crying, being able to hold his granddaughter and remember. He says, I remember everything.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a crazy image. Him holding his granddaughter, a huge sword.
And a huge sword, right, which he has not let go of at all yet, after vanquishing this demon. And his son starts asking what's going on. They're trying to figure out, this gigantic tornado, galaxy, hurricane thing that was going on. And what ends up happening after this, right? We kind of see that Emmett is lucid, the sword is there, and then he starts. So the house was completely decimated by this storm, and he, using the power of this sword, entirely rebuilds their house out of just like completely broken, destroyed wood. And then Emmett kind of tells them, or the sword starts talking to Emmett, the grandpa, which is really the kind of interesting thing. And we learn that the sword is Valifax. Valifax, the sword, the gigantic galaxy broadsword, which will give us a little bit more backstory. But starts warning Emmett.
It's a really cool concept. Like the sword Valifax is like the god of swords. It's like a sword embodying.
The sword.
Yeah, it's embodying. They're like, oh, it's like Excalibur. It's like, nah, I am Excalibur. I'm not only my Excalibur. I'm literally like every weapon. I'm every sword. Every time that like a human is like fighting with a thing, that's me. I'm there. I'm that concept.
I'm there. I've been there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty incredible. And so Valifax warns Emmett that something is coming. And what we see end up landing in their, quaint kind of prairie in Texas is the god that we saw from the end of issue 1 that has finally come back for the sword. And pretty interesting, the beginning of this, what we start seeing is that it's not even as simple as Emmett is wielding this sword. This sword is kind of chosen and is wielding Emmett a bit here. And basically the sword, Valifax tells this god, who we end up learning is Aristus, to kneel. Basically telling him, no. We see this incredibly powerful God come out of the sky, and the sword is still kind of the master of this situation.
Pretty crazy.
Yeah, pretty unbelievable. And so Aristus and Emmett, the grandfather, have this kind of like long conversation about Valifax, what it is, where it's come from, what this situation really means for both of them right now. And basically what we end up learning is that Aristus's father wants that sword back, and Aristus has come to get it. We see these moments where Emmett is starting to, he's remembering his life. And what he's kind of starting to understand now also is that the sword is what is bringing back all of his memories. And he is very vocal about the fact that he does not want to go back to losing those memories. One of the quotes from here is that, this is, I believe, Aristus kind of responding to Emmett saying, don't I deserve my memories? Aristus says, one should be granted the freedom of knowing one's own name. Emmett won't give up the sword. He says, I'm not going to do it. And Aristus has to take this message back to his father. And so we see this kind of moment where Aristus is like, okay. And he goes off and, we see him talking to this figure. We see kind of the camera, not even the camera, the panel focused on Aristus talking to this figure. And
very imposing.
Yeah, very imposing.
He's also we see this sort of the setting where they're at is it says the kingdom of always, which is literally like this little piece of shattered planet on the edge of a whole
of a black hole,
and it's just crazy. The imagery, it's like there's just big contrast between Texas and all this cosmic stuff. It's wild.
This gigantic. I mean, it's again incredible art. I can't recommend enough picking this one up for a lot of different reasons, but definitely the art too. But so we see Aristus talking to this figure, kind of builds up, basically saying, what were his words? What did he say to you? And then we get this gigantic figure that we're looking at, and Aristus says to him what Emmett told him to say, which is, "Come and take it." Right, and we understand that this is about to become truly a cosmic battle over this sword of swords. And so that's the issue of the end of issue 2. This is on to issue 3. Basically, the family's kind of, again, coming to terms with Emmett being lucid and what that really means for all of them. And we have these kind of continuous moments that show the family dynamic. Like we see that, Dina, the granddaughter, and Emmett kind of have this at least like nice relationship where he's being lucid, he's being sweet to her, different things like that. We see
one thing that's crazy also that it seems like I mean, I don't know if this is true for you, but definitely evocative of like dads and grandpas and stuff in my life is like he is all clean shaven except for his mustache. Right. He's got a haircut. He's all cleaned up. He's got a collared shirt on. Before he looked like a wild man. He had like super long hair, super, like his face is sort of obscured by this beard.
Right.
And here he is all like presentable, back together.
Right. He's
way,
as you remembered him.
Right.
Right. As the family remembered him.
Right.
And so we get these kind of great conversations where there's kind of this funny moment where Emmett and Dina are talking, and the sword Valifax starts joining in as well, and starts kind of like telling its own lore in like the most like crazy way that this child cannot handle. Is just saying, I am in every battle right now. I am, slashing necks, and I am blocking blows, and I am doing things in places you'll never even comprehend, right? And then Grandpa's basically telling him to chill out, and all these different things like that. But so we kind of see these moments, these kind of like sweet moments where these conversations are going on, and then we kind of jump into Roy, the son of Emmett, and Janie, his wife, talking about what this experience is like. And one of the things that they reference is that for Roy, seeing the way that his dad is with Dina, he kind of acknowledges that even when his dad wasn't as badly affected by Alzheimer's, he was never that way with him, which I think is a very interesting piece of context here, right? There's this not only has Alzheimer's kind of driven this, interesting wedge that's very difficult for families to deal with, but also their relationship beforehand was not a great dynamic. And so we see Emmett kind of come in, not purposely eavesdropping, but hearing kind of the end of that conversation, and kind of stepping in and taking Janie's place. And we see Emmett and Roy sit next to each other and start talking, maybe drinking a beer. And one of the things that I think is so interesting that Roy says that I feel like really demonstrates this kind of divide between the two of them is that Roy's kind of pleading with his dad to talk about the situation and talk about how, he's back, he's lucid, what's going on, how are we going to figure this out? And Emmett kind of just responds saying, your mother hugged you too much, right? Which is this kind of like classic, I feel like,
yeah, that's wild.
Very classic divide that we have even now, right, between fathers and sons.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably, it's different and to different extents with everybody, but, that's definitely like a general theme with dudes our age, right? Like, obviously we have our own struggles and whatnot, mm-hmm. but we're at least way better at talking with other people about vulnerable stuff and I think that was a different experience for our dad's generation. I think that certainly was a even more, a whole nother level for our grandparents' generation.
Right,
you know
right.
What I mean?
Very,
and what
very
was
true.
expected of men, and like he says that here, like he's I just couldn't. This is Emmett talking to Valifax and Roy, explaining about when he first got when I found out I was sick, when your mother and I found out, I just couldn't stand the idea of not being able to take care of her, of not being able to do all the things a man is supposed to.
Right.
So it's all, these are super present themes that they're like putting forward and trying to have us think about and maybe we relate to them, maybe we don't. People, will to different degrees. But it's just there's these sort of moments of just conversation in this book scattered throughout that are pretty profound.
I mean, they're profound, and I think they also they're building like the stakes of kind of this moment, because we also like have gotten this kind of foreshadowing that there's this battle coming, right? And so there are a lot of things that are unsaid and maybe untouched on, and what does it mean when this gigantic battle comes if those things aren't dealt with. And so speaking of kind of the start of a gigantic battle, they're having this conversation, and then out of nowhere, this like shadowy zombie skeleton looking thing takes a chomp out of Roy, takes a chomp out of his neck. And it's very intense. And they start basically, you see kind of Emmett take control of the sword and start fighting off. And then they kind of look off into the distance, and Valifax basically tells Emmett saying, that battle that we were talking about before, it's starting now, baby. Let's get to it. And so you start seeing Emmett, be this incredibly powerful being, right? Which again is this gigantic juxtaposition between what we saw him as before, but they're fighting against these zombies. He's swinging
literally
the sword.
Like a zombie, like a horde of zombies is just pulled up. It's all of a sudden like, Walking Dead. The family's like barricaded in the house, trying to hold the doors and windows closed. These zombies are trying to get in. Grandpa's going crazy.
Yeah, Grandpa's going crazy, but in a good way this time. And we also see kind of a little bit of the powers of Valifax too. We see kind of all of the knives and sword adjacent things that are in the house
start kind of
flying to
saws,
protect them.
Axes, sword, knives,
kitchen knives,
everything
flying against the zombies, kind of fighting against that. And then we get kind of our first really, not even our first, but like one of the big villains that comes into this. And we kind of learn from Valifax that Baelgrim has arrived. And he's this kind of, this is what we end up learning to be like the god of death, basically, in this universe. and
or a god of death.
yeah, or at least
maybe.
a god of death, right?
And so they talk about how these gods are they're part of this larger pantheon, but that's just one of many that's like there's just stories on stories and whatever.
Right, stories on stories and stories.
But that was interesting. The first guy, we said his let's see, I just found the page where he introduced himself, and he says, "I am Aristus, god of war, blood, and honor." And that's super interesting too. When he first pulls up, we maybe assume that there's going to be this big fight, like, oh, here's this dude, they're going to fight, obviously. And it's like, no, instead they end up having like a profound conversation
right.
at the, grave site of his wife. Like this is the second god that's pulled up. This time it is a fight. But yeah, we're talking about the god of. It's interesting that the god of war was sort of like relating to Emmett immediately.
Right. He's not very warlike, this god of war.
I guess,
at least in this story. I'm sure he's decimated peoples and done whatever else in other universes. And
Death Death pulled up with some zombies.
Yeah, Death pulled up with some zombies and said, "You know who I am." And the interesting thing here is Emmett is ready to go. He lunges at Baelgrim immediately, and it ends up being shown to be a trap. And he's like looking around, kind of fighting through the rest of these zombies. He realizes that he needs to go run back to the family in the house. He runs back to Roy and Janie, and he's looking in, trying to figure out what's going on. And then we end up learning that Baelgrim took Dina. And so it was really just it was really to draw Emmett away from the house, using this kind of fake apparition version of him. And he ends up trying to figure out where did he take her? And we end up learning from Valifax that he took her to hell.
Crazy.
Right? Taking the granddaughter to hell, that's pretty that's not great. And so this is the end of issue 3, and so issue 4 starts with kind of one of my favorite narrator points here, which says Emmett went to hell, right? Which is it's a great start to that. And so basically this issue kind of centers upon Emmett going to get his granddaughter back. And we kind of jump back and forth between Emmett being in hell, and we see Roy and Janie back home, because the thing that's pretty interesting about this is the zombies have not gone away. They're still hanging out, and so Roy and Janie have to fight against that. In Emmett's case, though, Baelgrim is basically trying to tempt Emmett, and we kind of see this apparition of Emmett's dead wife coming back to him. And this is the first time, actually, that Emmett drops Valifax. He drops the sword to embrace his long-lost wife. And we kind of see this moment where it's beautiful, but it's also terrifying, because this guy's going to get a hold of the sword. And so Baelgrim picks up Valifax.
This is also like a classic hero test, right? Like this is like Odysseus with the sirens, even like all the. Have you read the Odyssey? You read the Odyssey in school?
I have, obviously not for a while, but yeah.
But it's like there's all sorts of. It's like this whole conversation. Valifax is like, "No, Emmett, look away.
Right.
Don't drop me. Like, hold on.
Yeah, hold on to this. Yeah, don't fall into the apparition.
It's classic hero. Like it's like a trap scenario.
Right, exactly. And so Emmett does get trapped in that moment, and Baelgrim does grab Valifax, and we kind of see this short exchange between the two of them. And Valifax basically ends it with saying, you don't deserve what you already have. You don't deserve my power, because you already have massive power, and you do not deserve any more of it. Definitely. Valifax, it's kind of interesting. It almost looks like it kind of like whips around and just kind of snaps his back and just like breaks him in half a little bit. Yeah. And so Emmett, taking that moment, goes over to Baelgrim, who's looking like this absolute husk, and is kind of begging Emmett to stay away from him. And Emmett just absolutely beats him to, for lack of a better word, beats him to death. And shows
like a bloody pile.
Yeah, I mean,
it's crazy
gruesome.
that Emmett is capable of this.
Right, I know, it's really kind of an interesting thing. And Emmett later on in the story goes on to say that he's one of the nicer people from Texas, I guess. But he beats this dude absolutely to just nothingness, to like a mist.
It's crazy. It's crazy also that he. This adds some different context to earlier in the story when the police are at the house and he's like yelling like, "I'll kill you." You know what I mean? It's like, okay,
that dude means it,
right?
He's gonna do it.
This guy's like, this is dangerous, bro. Like, maybe the wife had a point. Like,
maybe we should just dip. Yeah,
like,
let's let everybody else handle this.
He's gonna murder someone. It's wild.
Yeah. So she was definitely right about that. But so he absolutely eviscerates Baelgrim, and the zombies disappear at the last second. Roy and Janie are okay. Emmett is able to save Dina from hell and get her back with Roy and Janie. But Emmett does not stay. He leaves immediately to go kind of start this fight with at least Aristus and maybe some others. And so this is the end of issue 4. And then we jump into issue 5, where we get this first kind of backstory of the gods, and we learn that this is the kingdom of always that these gods are from. And we learn who Aristus' father is, which is Adam. And we learn that Adam is the one who created Valifax from pulling down a sun. And they talk about him dooming 1 billion souls. I mean, this is not a good guy.
Yeah. And it specifically, like, the language he's using also ties in with the themes of, like, family and legacy and whatever. It says, I'll read a little part of this.
Yeah, please.
They say the God of Kings tore a sun from the sky to build a forge, doomed 1 billion souls. Also, he could create something to pass down to his children. Valifax was to be his legacy, one conceived in death. Or, so it's like, that's the whole thing with this. Is it's like, his legacy is more important than
1 billion souls.
All these people. Yeah. It's
This guy is willing to sacrifice anything.
It's tough
for a legacy. And this kind of begs us, I think, feel like when we're reading this part of the story, thinking about your own, like what really is legacy? Is it, I don't know, is it heirlooms? Is it stories? What is it, right? And so we start kind of asking these questions as we see how this incredible sword has come about. And so we see not only that, but we see Baelgrim and Aristus as kids, and we understand that just like they're children, and they also, funny enough, have a strained relationship with their father.
It's pretty scary. The imagery is this guy Adam holding Valifax, the crazy sword, strutting through a field of corpses with like 5-year-olds. Like he's like followed by these like little kids in armor, just kind of like grimly looking around at corpses. And there's like several other little kids other than the 2 that we recognize as the ones that visited Emmett's family so far. So we know there's a larger cast, or we don't know if they're gone or somewhere else or whatever. Right. But pretty tough backstory
situation to be in. And so we see that Adam is obviously incredibly angry that Baelgrim, one of his other children, is dead, and gives Aristus. He doesn't kind of say what the weapon is originally, but basically says, show him who you are.
Oh, here, look, I see. It's he gives him the hammer that he uses to forge Valifax. It's the same one in this picture where he's at the forge.
Right. So he gives him the hammer that he used to forge Valifax, which you could imagine, if you were thinking of like a rock, paper, scissors situation, I guess that's the one that should be able to win in that. And so we basically see Aristus arrive back on Earth, ready to battle Emmett. And Emmett and Valifax fight against Aristus. They have this huge fight. The kind of first blow of this hammer sends Emmett flying, and Aristus is, kind of strutting his stuff and basically just being like, just give up now. There's nothing you can do about it. And then he walks over to where Emmett's body should be laying. And there's this great panel that basically is like a curse word that's in some like God language that we could never understand. And there's no translation to English, but they said the closest thing is probably holy shit. And what we end up seeing is that Emmett arises from the rumble with Valifax, kind of like his shirt's like torn off, and he's like this like buff like grandpa who's like ready to take on the world, and take on the gods in the universe. And what's kind of funny that happens next is that Emmett, well, not even funny, but Emmett says to Aristus, "I'll kill you," right? And we get this kind of juxtaposition to the beginning of the story where he's saying, "I kill you," or "I'll kill you" to his family, basically to his granddaughter. And this is, when he's there, when Emmett is closer to like who he is himself, he's doing this, and he's saying this to defend his family, to keep them safe.
Right.
And this is basically Emmett is kind of whooping Aristus's butt, whooping his ass for real. And Dina, his granddaughter, yells at him to stop, and that kind of makes Emmett kind of snap out of this rage that he was in. Roy is basically kind of yelling at his father Emmett, saying that he's scaring his family, terrifying his
there's stuff, I mean, yeah, for context, like there's stuff exploding. The family's like having to take shelter because the car that they're trying to get into gets hit with some like...
Right, this is a god fight. This is the fight between a real god and a real god sword of swords.
It's sort of like what you were saying earlier. Like I really liked you said, Antonio, where a lot of it feels like Valifax is kind of just wielding the grandpa. Right. Like obviously the like he's doing his thing. He's comes across mighty and heroic and whatever, but it's also definitely like he looks super out of place in this. It's like this huge god in crazy god armor with this crazy hammer, and he's just like a shirtless grandpa with
right.
with this crazy god sword.
Yeah, and you pulled up actually a great image here. I mean, not only is he just whooping Aristus, but he also gets the hammer too. I mean, this dude's about to come and just absolutely obliterate Aristus, and luckily Dina saves him, and gets Emmett to kind of come to, and we, after this kind of fight ends, at least for the moment, we kind of get this deeper insight on Aristus himself, and it kind of shows that he himself is sad and also acknowledged the difficult relationship that he has with his father, and he kind of opens up to this family and opens up to Emmett and to Roy and the rest of them, and basically saying that his father would sacrifice him and other sons a million times over just to get Valifax back, and he kind of begs Emmett to give it back to him and allow him to go back, because he's basically been sealed off from the realm that he comes from. He's been sealed off from his home basically until he comes back with Valifax. And Emmett,
this hits the beginning part too, where it's like in the beginning we have it says Adam would the whole reason he made this sword supposedly was so that he could have something to pass down to his children.
Right.
But now we see that's kind of nonsense, because in reality he's willing to literally sacrifice his children to get the sword back.
That he's made
to
up
get the
in
sword
his
back.
mind. Yeah.
And it's like, what's the important thing? It's like we were saying earlier, like items, like what do we leave behind? It's like this is him literally putting his, like, this physical item that is his legacy,
Basically indestructible almost item.
Yeah. But ahead of his own children.
Right, ahead of his own children. And even gods in the story are sad, which is pretty interesting. And so that kind of leads us. This is basically getting to the end of issue 5, and Emmett, after hearing Aristus' story and realizing what needs to go down, goes to fight against Adam and uses Valifax to kind of teleport to this god realm. And we get these really kind of incredible illustrations as we head into issue 6 here, of Emmett fighting against these like crazy gigantic monsters. And I feel like this is a good moment to show us not only how powerful the realm is, but also to continue to put into context how powerful Emmett and Valifax are as a pair.
Dude, you know what they kind of look like in this? They look like those huge aliens that invade New York in Avengers 1.
Yeah.
The one that Hulk punches.
Right. They look very much like that. But these seem even stronger, at least off rip. But we see that Emmett is able to kind of vanquish them with the help of Valifax. And we kind of continue here with Aristus being back home with the family. We kind of get this back and forth between these two vastly different scenes.
Sitting on the porch.
Yeah, they're just sitting on the porch yapping. And Aristus is saying that one of the things that their family, that Roy and Janie have that his family doesn't, is an heir. Something that his family will never have. And then we kind of snap back to Emmett running into the throne room and confronting Adam and saying, that this fight is going on, but also acknowledging that he's not a warrior like them. The most important thing here is he doesn't care about the sword. He doesn't care about Valifax. No offense to Valifax, but he doesn't care. He just wants to remember his family and know who they are and remember who he is.
Yeah. That line, I'm not like you people. I ain't no warrior or a god or nothing like that. I just want to remember my family. I just want to know who they are. Can't you understand that? I don't want to fight any of you, but Valifax chose me and I have to think this all means something,
Mm-hmm.
Basically, it's what matters. It just shows how much he's willing to go through and how sort of vicious he's willing to be for the ability to know his family, to stay with them, to be able to be like conscious with them, and what it's again. It just he does, like, the author does such a good job of doubling down and bringing up the core themes, even just like fight after fight, scenario after scenario. They're all they're all super different, and now this is like the big showdown or whatever, and he's still like, boom, family,
right. This is what this is about. This is about. He's really kind of saying like outright what the story is, and we hear this from the narrator there too. But saying, this story, this whole thing, it's not about the sword, man. That's not the point. The sword is sick, and that's like awesome, and we're having these great fights, and it looks beautiful. But the point is not about the sword; it's about everything that comes along with it, right? Yeah. It's the power that he's wielding, and the sword able to give him obviously this lucidity and different things like that. And so, crazy thing is that Emmett is saying all this. Adam is kind of sneaking around, kind of in the background, with his little, I don't know what exactly are, kind of his dark force, and basically stabs Emmett through basically his entire torso. And
wrecked.
as Emmett is kind of trying to be vulnerable. We kind of get this. I mean, this guy Adam looks like, obviously he's God, so he's old as hell. But you got like this old generation dealing with the older generation who's like, oh, you're starting to be trying to be vulnerable. Absolutely not. You're nothing. All things die except for me. Adam basically kind of showing how he believes himself to be this, never-ending, all-encompassing God. Emmett, even after being stabbed like this, takes this moment where Adam is doing a little bit of monologuing and throws Valifax at Adam's throat, and the sword slices Adam and then eventually returns to Emmett. But what we end up learning is that Emmett has these injuries, and Valifax has already realized that this is coming to the end of Emmett's life. And we get this kind of snap away from that moment to Roy and Janie back in Texas talking about everything that's going on. Obviously, they don't know the gravity of the situation that is happening right now, but they know that it's coming to the end of Emmett's life one way or another. And this whole situation, they talk about how they're going to need to have this conversation with their daughter, with Dina. And we get this kind of really powerful shot of Dina looking down from the house. She was obviously sent inside because of this dangerous situation, but she's looking down from the house holding this little wooden sword, right? She's really kind of drawing inspiration from her grandpa. And we see it in this moment where she finally is feeling this connection with him. She wants to be like him, and it's all about to be ripped away. And she's kind of hearing this for the first time. And then we snap back to this God realm right as Emmett is kind of reaching his last bit of strength. And his body is kind of falling away towards the ground as Roy gets there, and Roy catches him, and they kind of share this moment. And there's this great thing with the kind of narrator talking about how, this isn't supposed to be, I never said this was going to be a happy story. And, one thing I actually didn't touch on earlier, Ben, that you did great with the way that you're kind of reading that dialogue, is that all of this has, all of the people from Texas and the narrator as well have this great like accent that's put into all the writing in this, which is makes it super fun. But we basically kind of get this understanding that this is coming to the end for Emmett completely.
And Roy is holding his dad. It's
right,
like his dad is like dying in his arms.
Yeah.
He's looking up at him. It's like the class. It's like the father is the son. Like it's got the panel where Roy is holding his dad. Emmett's looking up at him crying. It says he's unable to speak. Right. On the next page, the first panel we see is young Emmett holding baby Roy in his arms in the same position. It's like this, like the circle of life thing. Like we're all held by our fathers when we're born, and then we sort of hold our fathers at some point. Pass, it's just it's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. And so the kind of specific thing that the panel and page that Ben is talking about here is kind of the next big point, where as like the moment that Emmett is passing away, you get this kind of transfer of everything kind of between, Emmett's not able to say anything, but they have this moment between the two of them where Emmett is kind of sharing, like, they share this moment of all of Emmett's experiences and all the things that have been left unsaid and all of the moments that led them to the situation that they're in now, and also to the relationship that they have now. And I feel like Roy,
it's beautiful. It's an incredible page. It's like a splash page of panels. It's got him, holding him as a baby, sitting with him on a fishing boat, him proudly, just all these intimate family moments.
Mm-hmm.
And his wife is there, but they're not really. Most of them aren't focused on her. They're focused on Roy and Emmett.
Mm-hmm.
And just how much pride he has. That's another thing that's kind of sad in this story, right? Is there's a few different, obviously Roy and Emmett reconnect, but they don't really fully successfully have come to, all of the times where they talk, it's heated. It kind of turns into an argument, maybe some like offensive thing, Yeah,
it's never the conversation that, like, they never get to have the conversation.
Right.
The thing that gives, at the very least, I mean, hopefully Emmett in his last moments, but gives Roy this kind of understanding is actually the moment that Emmett dies.
Right.
That's the thing that kind of brings this like deeper understanding, or this we kind of talked about it off the podcast earlier, but this kind of like the moment where your life flashes before your eyes, right? And Emmett gets to kind of share this with his son and experience this moment together in his last
and
breath.
I think that's he may be trying to say some deeper stuff with that too, where he keeps saying like the things unsaid, right? Mm-hmm. Where it's like maybe sometimes the communication, it's like they're able to communicate to each other how important they are to each other.
Right.
With even though the words were never said, like all these things, maybe like this in this scenario, they're like, the magic of Valifax, the sword is help, whatever. They're having this magical moment, but I'm sure that's also representative of moments we might have where
Right,
even
absolutely.
there are a lot of things that maybe get left unsaid between a father and a son, but that doesn't mean that there's you don't know
Right. Yeah. It doesn't
the
mean that you
depth
don't
of
know.
what's going on there.
Right.
You know what
Right.
I mean?
I think that's definitely a very big thing. And so, we see Emmett pass away, and
This is also, we talked about this earlier, not to
no, please.
jump back in, but there's this final panel where Emmett has passed away in Roy's arms. They're both holding Valifax on their lap. It in the background, literally out of focus, is the climactic physical battle between what's his name, Aristus?
Yeah,
Aristus and Adam. Yeah, so it's like we were talking about before, but just the clear as day, showing the actual climax of this story is the moment between father and son.
Right. It's not the gigantic battle. It's not the not the kapows. It's the emotional weight of this. And I mean, the kapows again are fun, and there are great moments in this too. But this story, at the very least, is about, at the end of it, it is about this father and son and their relationship together. And so, as this battle is kind of coming to an end between Adam and his father, and Adam actually stabs through Aristus, assuming, I mean, we don't know for sure, but I'm assuming killing him, and showing how terrible and kind of opposite a relationship between a father and son can be if they aren't able to, if the father kind of isn't able to let go of this idea of legacy and this idea of how they want to be remembered, or different things like that. And in that moment, Roy also stands up, and Adam kind of turns to him and basically saying, give me the sword, all these different things like that. And Roy says no, and they teleport out of there with Valifax, with Emmett's body, going back to Earth. And we end up learning from the rest of the story goes through the narrator rather than conversations between characters. And what we end up learning is that after that, the family never sees the gods again, at all, and they end up, they don't exactly explain, but they end up being separated from Valifax as well, and they never end up seeing the sword again either. And we hear this thing again, that this wasn't supposed to be a happy story or a story about a magic sword. And it kind of talks about how this story's been passed down. It was, they talk about Dina being like a grandma and passing it down to her grandkids, and then those grandkids are the ones that told this narrator that story. And so this, maybe this is like the great, I don't know how many greats, a couple of greats, grandchild of Emmett. And there's this really, really beautiful exit, which I'll let you read here, Ben, that kind of takes us out of the story and again reminds us what it's about.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's how it wraps up. It says, the narrator says, like I said, it's not necessarily a happy story, but that ain't really the point. I don't think the point is that we keep telling it, and that if we live our lives the way Emmett did, if we find folks who love us and we fight like hell to hang on to them and love them back the best we can, those people will always remember us, and none of us will ever truly be gone. We'll just become stories.
Right. And so that, I mean, I remember, and I can even feel it right now, but I remember reading that last page, and I think, there was this, obviously you get like these flashes of what the themes are about this story, like throughout the entire thing. And some of it is pretty overt, but you get to this kind of, climax is obviously not the right word, but this conclusion. Thank you. Yeah. This conclusion of this story. And I mean, it really is like deeply emotional, and it was this incredibly beautifully drawn, beautifully illustrated, beautifully colored story with great writing that culminates in this lesson about family, about letting go, about legacy, about how to handle loss, and again, also the idea that I think in this case, legacy is about the relationships that you build with the people around you, rather than kind of arbitrary, whether it be items or whether it be what it is that you want to leave behind. Right, this is about how you treat other people and about how those relationships will carry your story on into the future.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many pretty profound themes laid out very successfully in this. Another thing that's crazy, right? I mean, we've just sort of done a in-depth little walkthrough of that whole story, and it's like this is compact. It's part of the thing with comics that I think is like a little bit similar to poetry. That sounds dramatic or whatever.
No,
but literally,
I don't think it sounds dramatic at all.
Or songwriting even, especially like pop songwriting, like
sure.
Where you're trying, like, this isn't a very, there's not a lot of words going on here. This isn't a very long story. Like, they've managed to express and communicate a lot of like rich feeling and symbolism, and
Absolutely.
made us think and reflect on our own experiences and whatever in a really, a small amount of words, small amount of pages, very concise storytelling. The fact you can even just communicate this much with this much depth, this efficiently is wild.
Right. Yeah. It's, again, like, anybody, if there is anybody, we appreciate you obviously for listening to this, but I think the other big thing, go read this story on your own, and I think experience it. I don't know what relationship, and we don't know what relationship you have with your father or your parent in your life, but we think that, or at least I think that, and I feel like Ben probably too, we think that you can take something away from this story to maybe even better understand the relationships that you have with the people around you, and also maybe even the relationships that you want to have with the people that will eventually come after you, whether that be your own kids or just people in your family or in your life.
Right. Yeah. And on top of that, you get to see some crazy art.
Right. Crazy art.
Crazy sword battles happen. Yeah, it's great.
Don't get it twisted. The art is incredible.
The art is incredible. Too. And the cool sword fight scenes are really dope.
Right. Great action as well.
It's the whole package.
Yeah.
It's the whole thing.
And, as we've kind of gotten through this kind of like general breakdown of this story, we can dive into a little bit of kind of analysis here as we head towards the. Yeah,
we definitely want to do what we try to hold ourselves accountable to every story, and circle back to our 5 concepts that we picked out from Scott McCloud's book Understanding Comics.
Yes.
So that's our academic mission, is to try to hit a little. We'll talk about those 5 concepts. I want to talk a little bit about Image Comics as well, because this is the first comic that we've read. We started with a Marvel comic. I feel like people our age, when people think comics, obviously people are going to think Superman, Batman, that's DC, but right now in this current era, Marvel has been
taken over. We just saw obviously their whole what is that movie called? Was it
Thunderbolts?
Thunderbolts. Okay, that's.
Did you see it?
No, I haven't seen it.
I did see it,
but I saw the whole new Avengers thing.
Right,
which is pretty interesting. So,
it's cool.
Yeah, but anyway, Marvel, DC, those are the ones that people mainly think of.
And this is Image. So I think it's very interesting, and also good context of like the history of the comic books industry at large, and also where it's going. And it's we're gonna take a little break. We're gonna go stretch our legs and get some water and whatnot. And
that sounds good.
We'll come back. But yeah, so we'll go a little more in-depth analysis, and we'll also talk about Image. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. We are returning from our break.
We are.
And we're going to sort of transition into talking about the 5 concepts, which are the 5 sort of takeaways that we took from Scott McCloud's book, Understanding Comics.
Understanding Comics, yes.
Yeah, we talked about that in our first episode. So basically, we're just going to run through these right now. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the level of abstraction. Just basically like how realistic or stylized the art is. And, there's sort of iconic simplification, which means sometimes comics can be more cartoony, but it's not just like, oftentimes that's intentionally, like the pictures are simplified so they can convey more emotion even, or be used to emphasize like specific types of, details.
Yeah.
So what did we type up earlier, Antonio, when we were discussing that?
Yeah, when we were talking about this, I think, one of the biggest things that I think noticed right away is that this book is not kind of cartoony in the way that it's drawn and illustrated. It's pretty realistic. I mean, it's you see a lot of, I think the best way to look at this is that you see a lot of, like lines in people's faces when they're making certain facial expressions, right? You see a lot of like you can kind of feel how tired they are and feel how, exhausted they might be, different kinds of things like that because of the detail that's shown in the faces. And obviously this is also a, fantasy story, but, as real as those types of things can look. And I think that there are in certain cases like a little bit of abstraction when we get this, some of these like zoomed out views, especially of like the universes or of the, if you think about like zooming out on the big kind of city towards the end of this, when Emmett is going to Adam's kind of realm, we get this little bit more of abstraction there. But I think in general, it's pretty realistic.
Oh, for sure. When we were talking earlier also about comparing this to Ultimate Spider-Man, like what we just read, in our previous episode, and we went back and took a look at those. We were sort of, as we were talking it through, honestly, we should have had more of that discussion on mic, I feel like, which was great. And I mean, we're learning as we do this, but because then now we're like, well, what we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Versus just talking about it. But
what we're talking about now is.
Right, exactly. Like in our minds, we were talking, oh yeah, the Spider-Man comic, that was pretty realistic too, obviously. And this one's also realistic. They should be pretty similar or whatever, right? Then we went and opened the books up side by side, and it's pretty drastic.
It is pretty
the way
drastic.
The faces especially are depicted. Like the in Ultimate Spider-Man, although at the time in the episode we were like, yeah, they're depicted very realistically.
Right.
Compared to this, they look like, an animation. Like the way that like a highly detailed animated thing would be versus like still images. It's just interesting how much it varies and how difficult it is to try to articulate this, because we're talking about the level of abstraction. How abstract is it? How real is it?
Right.
Oh, and then for both of them we said pretty real.
They're pretty real. Yeah.
You put them side by side, they're they're really different. So it's basically what I'm trying to say is it's very difficult to articulate all this well. But some of the things that we talked about is like there's a lot more shadow in this. There's a lot more almost energy and forced perspective and stuff like.
Right. Yeah. Definitely.
Sort of like while people's faces might be very realistic in terms of weathered skin and realistic proportions, also not like everybody's hot. I know that's like a weird thing and a lot of times in superhero comics or whatever, everybody looks like a model or variations of a model. In this one, everyone just looks like
real people,
real weathered Texan people, even the gods, right? Which is also interesting.
Right.
These gods were not depicted as these like perfect, beautiful things. Like they were kind of haggard.
2 out of 3 were like decrepit. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And even our whatever his name is, Atlas, the one who's like Atlas. His name is definitely a play on Atlas, right?
It almost sounds like it, but anyway, yeah. So
he's just a guy. He's just a big guy with like a mohawk.
Aristus.
That's what it is. That is kind of like Atlas, huh?
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's interesting. It's difficult. I've now repeated 3 times that it's difficult to articulate. I think underlining how difficult it is to articulate. The art is beautiful. The level of abstract is just right.
Yeah, I would agree. But it's pretty real. I feel like it's like dramatic realism. It like takes like the pretty real type of stuff and adds. We talked about shadow earlier, but like kind of accentuates a lot of the things that are already kind of naturally there and just again makes them more dramatic. So that's kind of related to the level of abstraction. The next of these 5 that we normally talk about are the panels and gutters. And I think one of my favorite things about God Country here is that there are certain pages. I mean, this is like one of the beautiful things about comics is that you get these kind of really incredible page turns where the art opens up, and depending on what's going on, maybe there's incredible wording that's going on there as well. But they're these great, and I guess Ben, you said that they might be called splash pages.
Oh yeah, splash pages. It's like when sort of the pages will combine to create like one huge panel. This is like an iconic thing in superhero storytelling also back in the day, because those would oftentimes be the ones where they'd have all the heroes on frame at one time, like big zoom out. Oh, here's the battle, and there's like all these,
and all your favorite heroes.
It's a thing.
Are there.
Like there's all these iconic, and obviously artists use it in a lot, with a lot more nuance in a lot of different ways other than just show a really big picture of everybody at one time. But oftentimes these are these kind of huge scale zoom out, set the larger picture, scenes.
Yeah. Yeah, and what's interesting about most of the gutters in this is that most of the gutters are white, but in some of these big splash pages, you have this kind of situation where there's like not really gutters in the sense that they're drawn and like you can really see specifically the lines. It's like these other panels are kind of plastered onto the larger splash page panel, and kind of the gutters end up becoming the background of what's going on there.
Right. I love that. Definitely really cool. It's both like it's a really effective use of space in one way, and also it goes further than that in the way that it's like when the artists make the decision to kind of break normal structure, like just panel to panel, gutters in between.
Right.
It oftentimes is like there's some intention behind that.
You know absolutely. I think that there's definitely like massive intention behind that. Because I mean, if you could stick with just like the regular gutters all the time, you could. But they make this big choice not to. And I think one of the other kind of cool things that they do with gutters here, which kind of is also goes in between kind of the way that they jump between different shots. There's one kind of specific scene that we talked about where the gutters are kind of, it's like this one image that's been broken down into multiple panels. And each of these kind of like gutters help make up the image, but they indicate time passing throughout that scene.
Time is passing between the panels, but the panels are literally just broken up pieces of one larger image. Like there's no like the camera is not moving.
Right.
It's it's a one shot, but instead, it's such a cool way of communicating like a lingering oneer.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And that's one of the moments where the granddaughter and Grandpa Emmett are like talking on the porch, I think, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
and we're seeing this like one beautiful, almost like watercolor and pastel looking
shot of like the two of them together sitting on the front porch of the house. Yeah.
And we're looking down from the roof, and it's just like these.
It's like the first two panels are like of the roof, kind of like, but it's again this larger image, and then it gets to the last thing, which is them talking, right now.
And it's so cool how we don't. I mean, obviously we're pointing that out, going like, looking back through the book with these concepts in mind and trying to identify these things, sort of, as we're educating ourselves and trying to get more,
academic about these.
Yeah, trying to get a little bit more academic about this stuff. It's amazing. Like neither of us clocked that while we were reading it the first time.
Yeah.
We're just excitedly.
Noticing,
going through the pages, and this is all just sort of downloading and communicating. Like we clearly understood, this is like, here's the passage of time. Our brain just like interpreted it and knew what it meant.
Right. That's actually really, really interesting.
We didn't even think about it.
For sure. Yeah.
Right. So it goes beyond just like, look, they laid it out like this. It's like these people are so skilled at this. They're manipulating
time.
Yeah, they are. They literally are. They're manipulating how our brain decodes these images with these techniques that we didn't even know about until we read Scott McCloud's book.
Right. Yeah. Pretty incredible. Yeah. And so a lot of this comic here is a lot of kind of action to action shots. We talked about a bunch of these different types of kind of transitions between panels in our first episode. So definitely go check that out. But there's lots of action, which is kind of jumping between, like, imagine like somebody kind of swinging a sword and then either jumping to, and I'm trying to remember the name of the other one here, but basically the kind of two different ones that we see here, I feel like are, let's take somebody swinging a sword and then seeing the reaction to that happening of like somebody getting hit, right? Or, these kind of like back and forth conversations and things like that.
Right. Moment to moment.
Yes.
Moment to moment is the one where it's just like showing time progressing on the same item.
Yeah.
But there's also they use moment to moment very effectively in some of the action scenes too, which I'll say, we really enjoyed a lot of the action in Ultimate Spider-Man. But one of the things that we pointed out or we realized was there would sort of be, okay, look, here's Spider-Man swinging through the city. Here's a cool, big, splashy shot of Spider-Man swinging. And that sort of more or less represents the passage of time of him doing that, right? And then even in the fight scenes, there were some that time sort of slowed down and we saw moment to moment. But mostly it was sort of like iconic pose of a fight, flash to another iconic pose of later in the fight. There was a bunch of times in this where we got to see reach for the sword, pick up the sword, go into another position, throw the sword, and it's more the actual dynamic stuff is getting a little bit more laid out to us. Not all of it, obviously, but like these specific moments, we're sort of seeing them move
more in their entirety than we've seen in some of the other stuff that we've read so far. Definitely.
Right. It's pretty cool. It's yeah, obviously they sort of are different. There's advantages to both styles, but they definitely use this. They do it to great effect.
Yes,
I'm trying to say. Yeah, they do a really good job with it. It works.
Yeah, they really do. And I think, most of the stuff that we see, like jumping from like big scenes to another, like there's some that we talked about before where, sometimes there'll be a big battle going on and then it'll jump to, kind of the juxtaposition of the family all together, or the fact that they weren't all together, or kind of the other big scene jumps I feel like are between, obviously each of the issues and different things like that. So I feel like that's a lot of what we've seen. And most of, I think, is there anything else that you want to mention about panels and gutters?
No, I think we yapped about that.
We yapped about it enough. So now we can talk about color, which is a big thing in this as well. I mean, all this stuff is, but the color in this is absolutely gorgeous. I know we talked about earlier one of these really amazing.
We also should we should shout out as we move on to color.
Yes, please.
We should shout out the artist Jeff Shaw. Or Geoff, as I said.
Our
boy Geoff F. Shaw. Go scope out his work. But yeah, a lot of we're about to talk about the color artist Jason Wordie.
Yes.
But I just realized we were about to introduce the work of Jason Wordie, and without talking about our boy Jeff. Yeah. So just to reiterate and check back in. The writer of this awesome book, Donny Cates, artist Geoff Shaw, color artist Jason Wordie, and the letterer is John J. Hill. And we're gonna circle back to the letterer's work in a minute, but sorry, I thought we should just shout out, and give some props and recognition to the contributors.
Yes, we absolutely should. And so, with Jason Wordie, his use of color here is really, really incredible. I talked about kind of the sunset, sunrise situations, but also the really intense contrast between positive moments and like negative moments, right? When I think about it, I'm trying to think back about the use of, like, for example, like the color red, right? And one of the few moments that I feel like we get a lot of red is when we see Emmett get angry. When he gets like actually angry, like in the beginning, I can't remember. I think it's when he is saying that he'll, kill everybody, right? He's experiencing kind of the worst like throes of his Alzheimer's. There's red there when he beats Dr. Death to death. There's a lot of red there, right?
For sure.
And so, there's a wide range of colors that are used here, and I think that they do an incredible job of conveying emotion.
Oh yeah, for sure. Earlier we were talking about, when we're trying to describe a level of abstraction, we're talking about how, it's realistic. The color is definitely not realistic in the best way.
Right.
It's not only both in terms of like he's using vivid color to draw our attention to like magical elements. Example, the sword god. What's his name? Valifax, right? Yeah. Valifax literally has this like trail of rainbow energy.
Right.
That sounds that doesn't sound as like cool and celestial as it looks, but it's like trailing light, you know what I mean? And then the magic storm that arrives in the beginning, this big tornado, is like green and crazy.
Yeah, even on the cover of this, there's like a whole. that storm is like a whole bunch of different colors.
Right, it's sort of like a rainbow of
energies that are just flowing through.
So obviously, there's unreal magical elements that they're highlighting with color, but also just the way, for example, when they're sitting on the porch having a conversation, it's not just sort of matte, realistic browns, laid out in some kind of pattern. It's like a beautiful watercolor of different things sort of seeping into each other. There's a lot of sort of pastel scenes. There's a lot of watercolor, pastel.
Yeah,
it's sort of
a lot of the colors do blend, like you were saying. With watercolor. It's pretty. It really is like a very interesting style, and I think lends itself. It was kind of interesting is like the way that just like all this stuff, some of these moments blend together, and who knows if you want to do a real deep thing, like when it comes to things like Alzheimer's, the way that things start to blend and fade away and different kind of stuff and whatever else, right? Who knows?
Maybe
I could be making reach, but who knows? Maybe I'm not.
Maybe there's something like that. Like there is a lot of maybe this story could be interpreted as like some kind of stories that the hallucinating grandpa was talking
Yeah,
about,
who
or so, you
knows?
know what I mean?
Right.
There's lots of different. I think you're absolutely right. Like Alzheimer's and that the experience of Emmett going through that is at the core of the story, and
Right.
I think you're right. As things sort of get more fantastical and hallucinatory or whatever, the colors get crazier.
Yeah, yeah. That was, but anyway, it's an absolutely beautiful, beautiful use of color. Shout out to Jason Wordy again. And I think, yeah, I think that that's the most of the stuff that I wanted to touch on about color here. Now we can kind of move forward to one of our other uh, pillars here.
Concepts.
Yeah, concepts. But talking about the line work, and this kind of goes with a little bit of some of the stuff that we were talking about earlier with the level of abstraction and kind of just the way that the panels look themselves. But the line work is really expressive. Like we said, that there's a lot of stuff that leads to shadow. There's a lot of, I mean, when I think of like the outlines of the characters, like the stuff is all, again, pretty thin and like realistic. You're not getting like these big, super bold lines where they don't need to be to kind of like have this kind of
there's so much
emphasis.
There's so much texture,
Yes.
right? Like that's like
That was a good word that you used, yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's as I've keep repeating, it's really difficult to describe images.
Yeah.
We'll also show them to you, but it's not just the accurate outline and depiction of things. They really sort of make you feel.
Right. Yeah. I think again, a texture I think is like a perfect word because it looks like how these things like should feel.
Right.
And I think that they do an incredible job of making that feel that way. And I think that, the way that they have all these fight scenes. I mean, the fight scenes also look, I think, based on the line work, they look very like crisp, right? You're kind of feeling all
Right.
these like sharp slices. You're feeling all these like quick moments or these, when Emmett gets like thrown, through this rock and whatever else, like you're feeling kind of a little bit of like the weight of that. And I think that also kind of pulls from what you talked about, which is like the texture.
Yeah, it's also this is another sort of abstract way to describe it, but it's also very it's almost jittery, like that, which sounds like a knock, but it's like frenetic. There's like energy to it. I don't know how to describe it. Like if you were picturing someone drawing this, you can kind of imagine them like they're like
They're
again
going crazy on the canvas.
like I keep referring back to Spider-Man, but as of right now, we only sort of have 2 books we've read together to compare. This is going to get easier as we
we'll
go
get
on.
a longer list.
But
for
look
sure.
how like in Spider-Man, everything is sort of like very well rendered and like and careful. You know what I mean? Obviously, the other God Country, the line work is careful, but it's it's kind of scrappy.
Well, I think, and again, it's a very like stylistic thing that shows that these artists all working together kind of created this style for this, for this comic here,
right.
And it's pretty incredible. So, as we said, go get the book, go take a look. And I rhyme all the time. You hear me? All right. The next thing that we want to touch on here too is the word-image relationship. And so one of the big things that we noticed, and sometimes is the case kind of generally with comics, but there were much fewer words, I think, than images here. And I think that there's a lot of, that's not, to say that there weren't a good amount of like dialogue scenes and different things like that. But I think that when you think of how much real estate sometimes is taken up by the words versus the images, I think that the images maybe controlled more of that. But this is another situation where there's really incredible writing that makes really good use of all the space that these words end up.
Absolutely. Another thing that's cool, in our last episode, we talked about the system in which they break up all these different roles, like have people do the lettering, people do all this different stuff, right? In the back of God Country, do you mind passing me? Sorry, I just picked it up and realized I was looking at Spider-Man. So there's one page here written by Donny Cates, obviously, and it says, Panel 1, pull out a bunch and show Aristus gesticulating wildly, enthralled in the magic of the story he's telling here. And then it's got the dialogue. Panel 2, tight on Aristus, looking down on Emmett, and proudly but not boastfully explaining things. You can see they've thought it out panel by panel. The artist has explained it. Then we can see the outline of the sketches of them laying that out. Then we can see it gone back over boldly with darker
we see
lines.
Each artist kind of adding their touch onto this to really create this incredible final product.
Then we see the color added in over the bold line work. And then finally, there's a whole other step where they decide where to add in the words. And it's like what you're saying is, as well, that's interesting. Like in this process, obviously the artist is intentionally leaving some space and leaving room for where words could go.
Right.
But that's also a whole, it's pretty admirable that they can then figure, like they're going to have to lay out, okay, how do we show all this?
Yeah, it's interesting. It makes me think of like, obviously this is like not maybe like the best comparison because it almost makes it sound negative, but it's like, you know how sitcoms, like the way that they tell their jokes always leaves like room for like a laugh track, you know what I'm saying? And it's like, obviously this is, I think, I don't want to be sounding derogatory in any way, and I think that this is maybe like a cooler way of that kind of thing. But the same kind of situation where it's like you do these things with the expectation of something else filling the space, right? And that's going to be a very interesting way to create art, right, with that in mind. I mean, there are some of these things that are maybe easier than others where the amount of words that the person is saying is less, so you have a little bit more freedom there. But that's actually a beautiful kind of like interplay between these different artists that has got to be really interesting to kind of find the right balance, right, of how does the artist who's illustrating this and drawing this interweave back and forth with the text artist and maybe even also with the color artist as well, of like, what do we feel like deserves, and maybe deserves isn't even the right word, but what do we feel like in this panel should take up the most space, and what should be the thing that really draws people's eyes in there?
For sure. Another thing that's really cool choice, like creative decision, is all of the gods, their word bubbles are gray and they have white letters, and all the humans, people from Earth, have just like a more traditional white bubble with black text on it.
Yeah, that's a good.
And then also they differentiate when they're in hell. The death god, his text bubbles are like black, outlined in white, and have these like jagged, bubbly edges, which even everybody else speaking in hell.
Yeah, wow, I didn't even notice that. That's such a comic specific thing that is like so cool.
And we can't hear their voices or anything, but like on this one different page, we see 4 different people talk, and there's 3 different, like, the god of death has his own style, humans have their own style. It just says a lot. It gives us even more context about like differentiating who's talking, the vibe. Like they don't have voices,
right? And
but you can see
what does it feel like? Yeah, it's like
when Valifax talks, we don't even we always know it's Valifax because it even just visually our brain is like, this is different.
This is who it is. The Sword of Swords. Yeah, that's a really great pickup. So I mean, this is really, I think, well used. Again, like also the way that they kind of like had narration in this. Right, we talked about. One of these things that was different about narration when we read Spider-Man was that it was mainly used for kind of moving around time and maybe giving you a little bit of backstory, but not a lot.
Very sparse. It'd be like sparse. The previous week, or like in New York, or something like that.
Right. So in New York, yeah. And so the difference with this one is that the narration plays a very big part in this, in kind of like giving you the context of where the stories come from and what the moral is kind of at the end.
They tell us outright.
Yeah, exactly. They tell us outright and take us through the big motions of this story.
It also, like, I'll give you guys some examples. It says here, like, for the Quinlans, Roy and Janie, I mean, their little world had just been shaken to its very foundation. Roy's childhood home out in West Texas had been destroyed by some kind of shadow demon from outer space. Then we also get to see the characters speaking and interacting, but we don't have, there's this whole well-written little poem of just the story being told to us in a really expressive Texan accent as well.
Right, and that's exactly what I was about to mention. I think one of the great things about this, right, is that this is in Texas, and in the same way that you can imagine like dialogue in a movie feeling more realistic, like them being from Texas, or obviously for people that read more books than me and would probably think of that first, but really good job like with the accent here and bringing that in, and I think like a tasteful way, not like a cartoonish. And I think Donny Cates, we looked him up earlier. I'm pretty sure he's from Texas, and so it makes a lot of sense that he would pull from his.
Or he's got to have family from there, or he just did.
He's either from
research.
Or lives there. I'm pretty sure
that's something we could Google for sure. Yeah. But yeah, no, it definitely adds a layer of voice. It adds voice. The other we were just talking about how the different word bubbles are different colors, right? The narration has its own sort of visual situation as well. He's from Texas?
From Dallas, Texas.
From Dallas, yeah, there you go. See, it comes through.
Raised in Garland.
But yeah, so when the narration is happening, it's in these sort of rectangle boxes that are laid out. They're like a light brown bordered in a darker brown. Mm-hmm. So and they, which is sort of like the color of the background of the prairie in the beginning. Yeah. So it almost feels like when we're in outer space and having this crazy cosmic action scene, our narration still sort of is in Texas, like Texan prose in a brown Texas looking text box.
Yep.
Like it's another just like super subtle way that they're grounding this this whole story in the setting. And it's also just like God country. Like that's a Texas thing, you know what I mean? Like literally Morgan Wallen on SNL the other week was like, "Gotta take me out of here to God country." It's like, okay, like we get it. You don't want to be in New York, but like that's the whole play on this.
Right.
Except there's like, actual cosmic beings thrown down in the middle of Texas.
We got a double entendre there with God country.
For sure. So I think we should transition and talk a little bit about Image Comics in general, because this is the first, as we keep mentioning, we started out with Ultimate Spider-Man, which is obviously a Marvel publication.
Right.
This is Image Comics. They're sort of like the independent middle guy between. They're like the most successful one between Marvel and DC.
Wow,
right?
very cool. Yeah,
And
I don't know much about them.
You don't know much about them, but there's definitely there's really iconic characters that you probably recognize that are Image. Like Spawn was like the first, right? Like we don't know that much about Spawn, but let me tell you, we've seen a lot of T-shirts with Spawn on it and stuff. You know what I mean? Like this is Spawn. We'll talk about Spawn maybe in another episode, but there was this really when Image started. It was sort of here. Let's rewind a little bit. Let me just give some context, right? So it was founded in 1992, and it was created by 7 really high-profile Marvel Comics artists at the time. And basically, this launch stemmed from the fact that when and a lot of this is still true in a lot of different creative industries, not just comics, but when you're creating something for a huge company like a Disney or a Marvel or whatever, they own everything you come up with.
Right.
So let's say you worked at Marvel your whole life, you're getting paid a salary, you invent the Silver Surfer, you come up with the whole you make this whole mythology, and you spend like 25 years of your life making the Silver Surfer or whatever.
Right, it ain't yours.
Right. It's not yours. You don't have anything. Then you retire. They make 5 Silver Surfer movies or whatever. Like, they're not actually entitled to give you a dime. You don't get anything from Silver Surfer merch. People become millionaires, and some people become billionaires off of all this stuff. Right. And the people that are actually at the bottom of that, holding up the bottom of that totem pole, holding up the whole thing, actually making the art, is oftentimes some of the most underserved
very true
people, right? So this was sort of a lot of this, obviously I just talked about it in very broad strokes, but this was a very serious and complicated issue, and it sort of came to a head in 1992. Todd McFarlane is a really big name in comics. He was known for Spider-Man. He basically was like one of the super iconic Spider-Man artists. He was like a young, scrappy comic book artist, got given the responsibility to do Spider-Man, and he had all these like iconic poses and made him like really skinny and all of this amazing stuff. Basically, he became huge and had so much clout and power. He wanted to tell his own stories. There was all this stuff, right? Some of the other founders were Jim Lee. He was really known for making doing a lot of art for X-Men at the time. The Rob Liefeld, he did New Mutants. He created, a whole bunch of stuff for Marvel. This guy, let's see, Mark Silvestri, he was known for Wolverine. Eric Larson, he did The Amazing Spider-Man. These are all, I'm just listing these names. I personally only really know a bit about Todd McFarlane because I've watched some YouTube videos about it, and I know the name Rob Liefeld. Most of those other guys, to us comic novices, are
I'm a very novice, names. So these are definitely new
so
names.
We're trying to do our homework. We're trying to learn. But basically, all of these guys left Marvel, and they created their own studio, imprint publishing company. everything under the Image umbrella. And basically the founding idea was all of these artists were going to be able to create their own stuff and own the rights to their own ideas within the company.
Heck
That's
yeah.
still true today. Everybody who goes and publishes an Image, they
retain the rights.
they own their idea, which is really cool.
Great.
So it's this whole like bottom up artists unite business model, right? It launched. Spawn was like the big. They all had their own teams they came up with. There was like this team called the Young Blood. There was like all this different stuff. The real big one was Spawn. Spawn went crazy. Spawn was insanely successful in the '90s. So much Spawn merch. Image went bananas, and I think they had struggles. That I'm sure I can, in the notes of this, I'll direct you guys to some really cool YouTube videos talking about all this stuff from more experienced creators than us. But it's a fascinating story in and of itself. But yeah, basically it was a huge industry shift towards creator rights. It challenged Marvel and DC's dominance in the market. It pioneered creator-owned comics, inspired the rise of lots of different indie publishers. There's also then now there's Dark Horse. A big name for Dark Horse is Hellboy.
Sure.
There's Boom Comics. They do, there's all these different publishers now that do all these different comics. Some of them are working with different intellectual properties, like doing Ninja Turtles or doing Power Rangers or whatever.
Right, very
There's
cool.
different licensing, but there's also just a lot of original stories in Image. And as I was first getting into comics during COVID, I obviously read some superhero stuff like Marvel and DC stories, but I always ended up finding myself really drawn to Image. A lot of my favorite stories that really moved me or really impressed me or were super original and creative, not gonna lie, a lot of times come out of Image. Another cool thing about Image is the first issue of an ongoing series, trade paperback, is always cheap. It's always like $10.
Shout out.
And then so it's like if you want to try it, you can get it affordably, and then it'll cost a little bit more if you want to keep reading. But that's
But you're in there.
when you're at the comic book store and you're looking around and you're like, oh, should I buy this? Should I buy this? Should I buy this? Chances are you can buy a bunch of first issue Image stuff,
Right.
which is pretty
pretty
awesome.
sick. Yeah.
But yeah, so basically some of the big names under Image are like The Walking Dead. Guess what?
There you
A
go.
lot of us have heard of that. Saga. That one's just incredible. It's one of the best comics I've ever read in my life.
I don't know that one. I think we've talked about it
We'll
before.
get there.
We'll get there.
I hope. Invincible.
Right.
Freaking huge.
Yep.
I can't wait for us to get to Invincible as well.
Yeah.
Invincible is such a good show.
Something I have not seen or read, obviously.
But yeah, and it's recognized as it's the third biggest U.S. comic book publisher by market share.
Crazy.
It's right after Marvel and DC. So go Image. Yeah, so that's just a little like history. I don't know how long I just yapped about it.
Yeah, I
but
appreciate it.
That was history time.
No, that was good.
History
I
time
really
on Kickback
appreciate it.
Comics.
Yeah, so thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in. This has been Kickback Comics talking about God Country by Donny Cates and all these other incredible artists that we've talked about so far. Next time, we will be reading something, I'm sure.
Yeah, we actually haven't even decided yet. So
maybe there'll be a surprise.
Yeah, maybe it'll be a surprise. Maybe by the time this comes out, we've got an Instagram up and we'll be able to post ahead of time about what we're going to talk about, and some people can jump in and read it. But
Yeah, maybe it'll be in the future then. So you guys will already know before you hear us find out, which is pretty interesting.
I guess, yeah, that's crazy to think about.
Yeah. But anyway, thanks very much for listening. My name is Antonio.
My name is Ben, and thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us.
Yeah, kicking back and reading some comics. We appreciate it.
You know it. All right, peace.
Peace.